I've seen, well, I know pictures don't do justice to the thing, but it's 350 feet long. So that's a football field plus 50 feet. Wow. What about every love bug on earth? We could fill that thing up with love bugs and set it on fire is what I'd like to do. I wouldn't do that. Anyway. Oh, wow. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I have a couch if anyone wants it.
Okay.
It's a sleeper couch and has storage. Pretty nice.
Okay.
Good shape.
Anybody need a sleeper for their house or a trailer or eBay or whatever? See Sarah. All right. Is it working? It's not working?
Turned on, but
Is the volume up?
yeah, I think so. I don't know, there's no little button on here.
Safe travels. Met some good people.
Hello, hello.
Check, check, check. Okay, well, it's got the power on let's get another one, I guess.
There's a bunch of them back there. Okay.
Oh, goodness. All right, we'll get you another set. All right. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And we're going to, anybody have a prayer request, by the way, before we get started tonight? Real quickly? Quickly?
Can you pray for my dog? He's really sick.
All right, we've got a service dog that's not feeling well. All right, yes, sir. Let's do that. All right. Very good. I'm excited about that, too. All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, okay. All right. I'll pray for Christina. Okay. Yes. Glad of that. Also remember Lorraine's family. They lost their brother-in-law. Her sister's husband passed away, and the funeral is Saturday, I believe. And so let's keep that family in prayer. All right, well, let's pray. And then we're going to, we've been looking at different worldviews, and I realize that you're not supposed to do this in church, you know. I'm aware of that. But I think you are, you know, personally. And this is stuff that is reshaping the globe. But I don't live everywhere else in the world. I live here in the United States. And I would like to say to you, none of this stuff is affecting our country, but that would not be true. This stuff is absolutely reshaping the landscape morally, politically of the United States. So we're going to look tonight at that. And I want to ask you some questions and see what you think about some things. So let's pray, and then we'll get you squared away in just a minute. Lord, thank you for your goodness. I praise you for who you are. Nothing is out of control. The world is being steered by your grace and by your power and your authority. Nobody's taking it in a direction that has not been prophesied. And so that tells me that you're God. You know everything from the beginning to the end. And I ask you to bless us tonight as we study your word. Thank you for those who are here. I pray that you bless Christina Moy. I'm asking you, Lord, to bring resolution to her problems. I pray that you would bless Jonathan in these roadblocks or open doors, either one, that you've put in his way. And I pray, Lord, that you'd resolve those issues. I pray for Lorraine's family. And I'm just asking that you be what we need, whatever that might be. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We're getting into Romans chapter 2. I want to ask you, what do you think the benchmark for all moral values is? Where is square one? Where's zero? You start at zero. What's the zero for all moral values? Adam? There you go. Okay. All right. Now, good point, Nancy. Was the truth of the Bible in operation in the Garden of Eden? We'll look at that, all right? But question number 2, if the Bible is the benchmark for all morality, does that mean then that we are subject to its rule in 2019? All right. Okay. What if you choose to jump off of a building? Is gravity an option? See, you don't break the rule of the law of gravity. You prove it. All right. So, is it a matter of choosing to be under biblical rule, or let's just say God's law? All right. Is it a matter of okay, you can, if you Christians, you ought to be under there, that's fine. I have another law that is equally valid. Is that a valid statement? I have another rule that is equally valid. Correct. It is not valid. It is a completely different rule. We're going to look at that tonight. But it is not valid. Now, look in the book of Romans, chapter 2. And we're going to begin reading with verse number 14. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law. Now, what law is referenced right there? The law of Moses, right. So the law was not given to Gentiles. So, for when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, the Gentiles, having not the law of Moses, are a law unto themselves. All right, now, how does that come across to you? The Jew had a written code, law of Moses. It was a moral code. All right, now we're over here. The Gentiles did not have a written code, but they were subject to the same things. In other words, the Bible says in the Old Testament, thou shalt not kill. Was it wrong for a Gentile to kill as well? Did a Gentile know that murder was wrong? All right, thou shalt not steal. The Jew read that in the 10 Commandments. Was it wrong for a Gentile to steal? Yeah. Did he know it? Yes. All right. It is embedded in the conscience only of mankind. We are the only of God's creatures that has an inbred, innate moral code. Whether it's written as it was to the Jew. Now, did they also have it written on their conscience? They did. But the Lord gave them a written law as well. We did the same things. We knew the same things were wrong that the Jews knew were wrong. But we didn't have a written law. What does that tell you? That moral values don't have social construction. In other words, it's not wrong if society says it's wrong. It's wrong if God says it's wrong. All right? And so when God designed humankind in the Garden of Eden, He put in us an innate list of moral values. We have it. Horses don't have it. Dogs don't have it. Cats don't have it. They don't have what we have. All right, so he says, now look at verse 15. Which show the work of the law written in their hearts. So it was written on sheepskin to the Jew, but not to the Gentile. It was written in their heart. Their conscience also bearing witness. And that means being in symphony or being in harmony with, and their thoughts, the meanwhile, accusing or else excusing one another. In other words, even the Gentile knew when to accuse somebody of doing the wrong thing. That's not right. Well, it's not right according to what? According to the law that's written in my heart that God has given to me as a result of me being a human being is the bottom line of it. And so now, man is the only creature that God designed with this onboard innate sense of morals. Nobody else or nothing else has that. And there are two beliefs concerning man in the world. And we get these out of the book of Genesis, and we're going to go to that in just a moment. But these two views, number one, there's what's called a sin nature view. And this sin nature view is the belief that man by nature is wicked, by nature is evil. We don't learn it, we are it. So you don't learn evil from your parents. Now they might help hone it and shape it or try to stop it, but we come hardwired to do the wrong thing. And so there's this sin nature view, and then there's what's called a pure nature view. And the pure nature view is that no, man is essentially good. And when he gets around other men or people, society is what turns him sour. That's what turns him into a thief or a liar or a murderer. It's culture. Now, here's the modernist supposition. Let's clean up culture, and guess what will happen? There will be no more evil influence on people in the world. All we got to do is clean up culture. We're the problem. And if we can just make our minds up to start doing the right thing and being sweet to one another, and let's have a Coke and be friends, then the world will be okay. Now, Christianity, on the other hand, says that will never work because man is inherently evil, he's inherently wicked, and that just is multiplied by the number present when you get into a sociological group. Now, there is a law. If there is a law, that necessitates the presence of a lawgiver. All right? And so the law and the lawgiver, from the biblical worldview, is transcendent to humankind. In other words, we don't make up our own rules, our own moral values. We don't do that. Those things, in other words, it's like the Constitution of the United States. One of the underlying principles of the Constitution is you discover truth. It's already there. You just discover it. It's like looking for gold.
Can I be excused to lay down?
You may.
Asthma.
Yes, you may. Going to back? Okay. If there's gold in the ground, all you have to do is find it. All right? You need to discover it. You don't invent it, you discover it. Now, is there right and wrong in the world? Yes. Is it hard to find? Well, if you look into Scripture, and it's pretty much laying on top of the ground in the Bible. But now, Adam and Eve were not given the liberty to choose what they wanted to eat. You remember? Were there restrictions in the garden? There was one. Exactly, Nancy. One. I gave you one job. That one job. Don't eat the fruit on this tree. There were tens of thousands of trees and herbs and vegetables and all the stuff they could eat. But there was this one prohibition. And there were boundaries. There was what we would refer to as law. Now, man is a social creature. We were designed by God for interaction with other human beings. I need this right here. I think I know people well enough to know you need this. You need to be with other people. Now, the nature of man is pretty clearly expressed in his associations with other people of his kind. Have you ever noticed that you are attracted to people that have similarities? I notice here, specifically on a Sunday morning, all the grandmas get their phones out. Did I say, look at this? Isn't that the sweet? Oh, well, look at this. Oh, yeah, this. You know. Now, you don't see any grandpas in there. There's a difference. There's a difference. You've got Gator fans. Now, I know this is a silly, but that's how collective we are. You know, you're drawn to people that have similar interests, either age, job, or whatever that might be. And then we have your FSU fans also. I needed to put that in there as well. So this study of people in groups is referred to, and it's a relatively new science, and it's referred to as sociology. We study social groups and how people react and respond in groups. And the modernist says this is how people get to be wicked, by associating with wicked people. Well, how did those people get to be wicked? You know, at some point, somebody was by themselves. You know, so somebody had to bring wickedness to the group, and so it's kind of hard to escape the biblical truth that man, by his very nature, is evil, folks. Now, this is where it kind of gets difficult to comprehend. The babies that we have, we love them. The grandbabies that we have, sweet and cute, they're wicked. They're morally corrupt. Now, you say, well, they can't be. They are. But they're so cute. I'm aware of that. So is a baby rattlesnake. Isn't that, yeah, that is, you know, okay, I understand that. But he's venomous. Yes, sir. Oh, boy. And that's exactly what happens in cultures where there is no biblical influence. They eat each other. Exactly. You don't have to say a word to them about that. You're exactly right. Now, our culture does not shape our nature. Our nature shapes our culture. Now, in the 1830s, the population of the United States was about 13 million, which is roughly the size of present-day Illinois. And we had a lot more elbow room in the country in the 1830s than we have now. And the War of Independence was still fresh in our national memory. And a lot of its veterans, as a matter of fact, were still alive in 1830. And Andrew Jackson was the president then, and Andrew Jackson was presiding over a newly exploding economy, and the country was optimistic. I mean, we were feeling our muscles, and we were brand new. We were, had just come out of this war that has given us our freedom and our independence. And according to Thomas Lowe Nichols, I want to read you something that Thomas Lowe Nichols said about the country at this time in the 1830s. He said, quote, "We had no doubt that ours was the freest, most enlightened, and happiest country in the world. We knew that where there was a will, there was a way, and our teachers constantly stimulated us by the glittering prizes of wealth, honors, offices, and distinctions which were certainly within our reach. There were 100 avenues to wealth and fame opening fair before us. If we only chose to learn our lessons, of course, we learned them." Now, what Nicholson was saying was this: the country, for the first time, a country offered to anybody the opportunity to become successful. We didn't have any oligarch. We didn't have a dictator. We didn't have a king. We didn't have a monarchy. We had a constitutional government that gave everybody the opportunity. See, all men were created equal with the opportunity to become unequal. And at this time, in the 1830s, there was a French sociologist that came over here. And his name was Alexis de Tocqueville. And de Tocqueville traveled the United States. And he just wanted to see if what he had heard was true about this just being this wonderful bastion of freedom and liberty and everything. And he was struck, absolutely struck, by the spiritual content of the United States. And he said the United States is great because the United States is good. Now let me read you something that de Tocqueville wrote in his work. When he went back to France, he published a book, and it was called Democracy in America. And here's what de Tocqueville said, and it was pretty blunt, and it was sort of a prophetic warning to us, and it happened, but here's what he said. Because Roman civilization perished through barbarian invasions, we are perhaps too much inclined to think that that is the only way a civilization can die. If the lights that guide us ever go out, they will fade little by little, as if of their own accord. We therefore should not console ourselves by thinking that the barbarians are still a long way off. Some peoples may let the torch be snatched from their hand, but others stamp it out themselves. You understand what he said? He said, yes, there are civilizations, like in France, and in many other places around the world, that the torch was jerked from their hands by invading barbarians like Rome. But he said then there are others, they stomp the flame of freedom out by themselves. Now, approximately 30 years later, after de Tocqueville wrote this work, those words would be realized in the United States. And here's what happened. Our work ethic led to an absolute industrial explosion in the United States. We had the Industrial Revolution, and we had the cotton gin, and we had all these machines being invented and designed and put to work, and that in turn reshaped American society. For better or worse, we'll never be the same as we were. I'm not sure it'd be a good idea to go back to the early days like before, but it brought to a fevered pitch. There was a deep division in the country. Now, the North was industrialized. The South was agrarian. We were agricultural. And there was a boom, a perfect storm hit. And when it was all said and done, and when the smoke had cleared, the industrialization of the North defeated the slavery, agrarian culture of the South. And this invasion of industrialization, even into the South, brought a new set of problems that we'd never experienced before. Child labor. We'd never done that before. We put 8, 9, and 10-year-old kids in mechanized shops. And, oh my word, I've read the history that many of them had their arms cut off. They had their eyes punched out. They lost limbs. They were injured horribly. Many of them were killed while they were working on these machines. And so there was child labor. There was pollution. Now we had, gas-powered stuff, and it put stuff in the air that we'd never smelled before. We didn't know what this stuff was. And so there was some unrest in large cities particularly. So it created a situation that we'd never had before in this country. And this is the same exact thing that England experienced 50 years earlier when they went through the same thing. It's almost like we don't learn from history. And the Industrial Revolution reshaped us. And the reason I'm going through this little bit of history is to let you know our history is proof that we are evil by nature. All you've got to do is read our history and see what we've done to each other. I'm talking about just American history. Now, if you want an even more brutal picture of it, spread it out to world history and go back centuries instead of just a couple of hundred years. And there were 3 men that offered explanations for how are we supposed to control this new animal, this new beast that has been exploded out of the ground, this industrial revolution and these machines and all of this wealth and all, how are we supposed to handle all of this? And there were 3 men that more than any other 3 men shaped America. One in particular shaped the world, and two of them you've probably never heard of. One of them will be very familiar to you. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about these guys, but I just want you to know that there are some explanations about the nature of man that the Bible contradicts. But these explanations of man are taking over in the country. Matter of fact, they have for quite a while. One of these guys was a guy by the name of Max Weber. And Max Weber tried to explain how you control all of this industrial muscle through what he referred to as the Protestant tradition. And he said that it can be organized, and people just they'll just do the right thing. We just let people do the right thing. Well, I don't agree with that. So Max Weber, I think, was wrong. And then there was a guy by the name of Emil Durkheim. And Emil Durkheim said, what we have done, we have the men that have unleashed this beast are those that have been swept away by it. And this is going to create a wickedness that we have never dreamed possible in the United States. And I submit to you that the wickedness was already there. But Durkheim said this is going to produce wickedness. And I disagree with that. And then the third guy was a guy that you've heard of, and his name was Karl Marx. And Karl Marx, his view of the Industrial Revolution changed the world. We're still dealing with the thought processes of Karl Marx. We talked about him, I believe it might have even been last week. But he believed that the Industrial Revolution was a wicked, sinister way for rich people to get richer at the expense of workers. Now, the rich people were called the bourgeoisie. And the poor people, the workers that ran all the equipment for the rich guys while they were out playing golf or whatever he thought they were doing, they were called the proletariat. And Karl Marx said that the most wicked thing on earth was private property. And so what these workers need to do, they need to unite and overthrow the bourgeoisie and take control of their own futures. And that idea right there is what produced what we know today as communism and socialism. And these three guys introduced the basic foundation of what we know today as sociology. Now, there are two sides to this debate of moral values and the direction that mankind needs to go. Only two. Now, there are those of us on the biblical side of the fence that say man by nature is evil, and only a right relationship with God can cleanse his heart and put him in a right relationship not only with God but with his fellow man. You believe that? I believe that. I've seen that. I've experienced that. On the other side of that fence, there is a whole mess of people that disagree with us on this particular issue. And James Dobson and Gary Bauer, two guys that I highly respect, and I'm sure that y'all have heard of both these guys, but they wrote a book called Children at Risk. And here's what they said in this book, quote, "Nothing short of a great civil war of values rages today throughout North America. Two sides with vastly differing and incompatible worldviews are locked in a bitter conflict that permeates every level of society." Now, what we've done in contemporary American Christianity, we have failed to teach our children the values of the Bible that the founders built the country on. We've failed to do that. You say, well, preacher, are you sure we failed? Yes. Take a look at where we are. Take a look at what's going on. Just watch the evening news. And you tell me if you think that we have failed in this area. And you have probably heard of John Dewey. John Dewey is the father of American education. And John Dewey was what we would call a postmodernist. John Dewey's... That's another Dewey. Yeah, this is another guy. John Dewey believed that whatever you thought was right was right. And so he looked at the American classroom as a laboratory. And our kids basically were lab rats. And his idea of the American educational system was to retrain these kids to look at themselves completely differently than the Judeo-Christian ethic that had always been taught in the United States taught them. And he's done an excellent job. John Dewey did a tremendously evil job, I think, of that. Yes, sir. This was in the 20s and 30s. This was, yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, this has been going on for a long time. Well, it's exploded, yeah, very, very much so. Yes. Yeah, there was a time when classrooms basically were extended Sunday school classes, and they taught moral values from the Bible. You know, A was Adam and B was for Baal. You know, and they did it that way. But Dewey came along and changed everything, and basically we're still following his model in classrooms today. And so from the kindergarten class to the university class, we have thoroughly indoctrinated several generations of American young people with secularism, modernism, postmodernism, and now this new spiritualism that we'll talk about at a later day. But let me give you some real world. You say, well, preacher, that's just your idea. Let me give you some real world results of what we have done to an entire generation, maybe two generations of American young people. All right? Number one, the percent of students identifying themselves as liberals has reached a 40-year high. 2 out of 3 support same-sex marriage, and only 1 in 4 support any military spending. Now, this is from the UCLA annual survey in 2008. So that's a few years ago. The millennials. Now, millennial was born between 1980 and 2001. That's the millennial generation. They have the lowest level of church attendance of any generation in American history. That's Barna Research, 2003. Among those who do attend church in high school, and they graduate and they leave home, only 30% maintain a similar level of commitment in their 20s. And that research was done by Ken Ham and Brett Beamer. 1 out of 3 young people lived in a home where no biological father is present. That's the U.S. Census Bureau 2014. 1 out of 4 adolescents in the United States is currently at serious risk of not achieving a productive adulthood. And a productive adulthood is defined as holding down a job, creating a stable family, making a positive contribution to the community. 1 out of 4 probably will not do that. Only 1 in 20 engage in any spiritual training outside of church. Yes. Yes, those from, 1980 to 2001. Now, to me, this information is frightening. And the reason it is because young people are only 15%. This group is only 15% of our population, but they are 100% of our future. Totally. Practically every discipline that young people are exposed to is contradictory to the Christian worldview. And to be honest with you, folks, we've let it happen. We have let them take over the schools and not said anything. We have let them take over communities, and we've let them take over our universities, and we have said nothing because in many instances we are too nice to fight, or we're too scared to fight. I'm not sure which is the case. But according to Steve Bruce, now Steve Bruce is a chronicler of the history of sociology. and a liberal himself. And he said that sociology hangs on three threads. And we'll give you these three threads that these people believe. Number one, reality, or truth, is socially constructed. In other words, we believe, on that side of the fence, that culture defines the essence of truth. Number two, our behavior has hidden social causes. The reason I do what I do is because my daddy slapped me when I was a baby. My mama didn't tell me she loved me. This guy cut me off in traffic. My mom and dad got a divorce. That's why I'm wicked. No, that's not why you're wicked. That's what Freud said, if you remember. You know, Freud did all these nasty experiments on these kids and came up with the conclusion that, you know, people had problems because of some sexual deviation that took place. That's what your problem is, some kind of a sexual thing in your background. He was obsessed with that. The third thing, much of social life is profoundly ironic. Now, what that means is stuff happens randomly. There's no order, there's no purpose, there's no design, there's no direction. Life is like a ping pong ball in a wind tunnel. Now, those are the three concrete things that modernists say. This is what culture and sociology is based on. Well, an entire generation has been taught this, so that now a majority of these millennials are liberals. A majority of these millennials believe that homosexual marriage is okay. There's nothing wrong with abortion. Now, if on those issues they are leaning in that direction, that tells me that they have, if they're Christian, if there are any in that group, and I'm sure there's a large number of those that are saved, they've just been misguided, they've been stolen, they have been mistaught truth by these school teachers and college professors, and every worldview except Christianity believes that truth is socially constructed and it evolves as cultures evolve. We're the only ones. Yes, ma'am. It's true. I remember when you said that before, and it's absolutely a fact that they just were not taught. Right? And I've mentioned this to you before. I think Woodstock was a major paradigm shift in the United States. Those kids that were at Woodstock that had sex like a bunch of wild animals out there for a week, drank, did drugs, that bunch, the free love bunch, you know, love who you with and whatever, yeah, that bunch, they had kids. They had kids. And those kids had kids. And so they were taught this very same, no restrictions, no boundaries, do what you want, say what you want, live the way you want. Well, now, these kids are in Congress. These kids are presidents of corporations and companies and on school boards and in classrooms. Scripture is crystal clear. Yes, sir. In the show? Okay. Well, a kid doesn't have a chance. If that is his instructor, and then when he goes home, mom and dad confirm that, what else is he going to believe? You know, by the time he gets to be 13, 14, 15 years old. And then when they bring him to a church like this, they're just going to sit and laugh at us. You know, because, oh my word, where are we in the 1500s or, you know, what? Right, right, exactly. Yes, sir. Sure do. Farber and Sherry, who were two researchers, very, very liberal people, they quoted one feminist. And I want you to keep in mind that this group of postmodern thinkers, they don't have truth on their side. You understand this? They don't have facts on their side. So if you don't have facts and truth to base your argument on, you shift to emotion. Okay? Now, listen to this. They say, they quoted a feminist in their research, and here's what this feminist said. Feminist analysis begins with the principle that objective reality is a myth. It's a myth. Now, what I mean by objective reality is simply this. Something that is always true, anywhere, anytime. These people don't believe that. No, there's nothing that's always true. Well, yes, there is. They believe that truth is subjective. In other words, it's subject to their interpretation. It's subject to cultural nuances. It's subject to the group you're in. It's subject to Nazism. Oh. So then what they thought was right, and yes, legally, they did, according to the German point of view, at least the Nazi point of view, what they did was not wrong because it was legal, and who gets to define right? The government does. And the government defined that as okay, so we just did what was okay, therefore it couldn't have been immoral because we defined okay. It's an airtight argument if you're on that side of the fence. Oh, my word. Yes, sir. And the Muslims hate us for what we did in 1920 and 21 when we dismantled the Ottoman Empire along with some coalition forces. They've hated us since that day, and they're out to take back what they think is rightfully there. You're exactly right. Yes.
That is their program, their platform.
It definitely is. Postmodernists believe that whatever they say is truth is truth. You define it on the spot, all right? And so, this is the belief that postmodernism despises, just like John said, postmodernism despises the very thought of there being unchangeable truth to which everyone is subject to obey. They hate that because they want to be in charge of what is right and what is wrong. Now, let's go to the book of Genesis chapter 3. Let me show you where this started. This swill is millennia old. Boy, no, he's not. Oh, we love it. You give the rat what he wants to eat, and he'll eat it. And thank you for it. All right, now here's the deal. We're in the Garden of Eden, which I think is where the city of Jerusalem. I think the middle of the garden is where the city of Jerusalem is today. And this place, it was a park, was probably hundreds and hundreds of square miles. It wasn't a little garden spot in the backyard. This was a huge, huge area. This thing had quadrants. And in the middle of these 4 quadrants, these 2 main avenues, there was a tree. Probably it was like another species that was in the garden. I think it was a pomegranate tree. And the Lord deliberately put a moral boundary around that one tree and said, don't eat the fruit on that tree. Everything else, enjoy. Everything else, eat. Don't eat the fruit on that tree. Now, was the fruit poison? No, nothing wrong with the fruit. It was the tree of testing. Well, you know the story. You know, the serpent comes, walking on hind legs, and she is convinced that she is being she's being lowballed. Satan convinces her, you know God's lowballing you, right? What do you mean? You love him? Well, yeah. We talk with him every day in the garden in the cool of the evening. So you want to get closer to him? What? Yeah. Look, all you got to do, eat fruit on that tree, and you'll know what he knows. What? You mean there are things I don't know that he? Oh yeah. And so she was lied to. All right, now look at how he appealed to her in Genesis chapter 3, verse number, how about 3? She has said, but through the tree which is in the midst, or in the intersection of the garden, God has said, ye shall not eat of it. And that's true. Neither shall ye touch it. That's not true. Lest ye die. That's not true. He didn't say it's possible you'll die. He said you will die. He didn't say don't touch it. He said don't eat it because you will die. And so now she has edited it. She has muddled this thing. It's now, she's cleared it up, and it's just as muddy as the IRS makes the IRS code. You know, nobody understands it, so she has really messed it up. And the serpent said to the woman, you will not. Now he's aware that she doesn't know the truth. Did he know what God said about this fruit? He knew exactly what God said about this tree. Now he's aware, this woman has incomplete information. She's got inaccurate information. I can tell her anything. She'll believe it. And so the very next verse, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods. And that Hebrew phrase is translated gods in human form. He knows that you will become a God in human form, knowing good and evil, as if that's all there was to God, knowing good and evil. That kind of sounds good to her. And so when the woman saw that the tree was, and you know the rest of the story, she ate this fruit, and her eyes were opened, and Adam comes up, and he wasn't deceived. He knew exactly what was going on here, and he ate the fruit. He committed suicide on purpose. He knew what he was doing. And now, from that day, there's a principle of biblical interpretation called the principle of first mention, or the law of first mention. When something is first mentioned in the Bible, that's the platform for instance, when marriage is mentioned in the Bible. Right here in the book of Genesis, that is the definition of marriage forever, or at least as long as the earth stands. As long as there are people on the earth, that was the definition of marriage when it's first mentioned. And so here we have the first mention of man wanting to be his own redeemer, his own God, being able to define right from wrong on his own. That's where this started. It worked in the Garden of Eden. It works in universities today. It works in kindergartens today. It works in homes today. Law is necessary. And from the book of Genesis, God gave man the capacity to govern himself. Because why? If everybody is not, if no one is evil by nature, why do we need law? What's the purpose of boundaries if everyone is going to do the right thing already? But where there's law is for the purpose of protecting innocence and punishing guilt. That's all law does. It protects your life. You, according to the Bible, you are free to protect and defend your life. You are not free to take your own life, however. You can protect somebody else from taking your life or somebody else's life. But don't take your own life. You're not free to do that. And so we have law given to us. And this law is simply because we are by nature an evil species on this planet. And this is the thing that the postmodernist mind despises, because the postmodernist man wants to be in charge of his own definition of right and wrong. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Paul said it so well when he said that law stirs evil within men. And what that means is, if somebody tells you you can't do something, what does that make you want to do? Don't walk on the grass. Don't wet paint. Don't touch this. Don't stand over there. Stand over here. You know, and it's just like, nobody's going to tell me where to stand. Ain't nobody going to tell me what I'm, you know, that's, law just rubs us the wrong way. That is a perfect sign. You tell a baby, don't touch that. They'll look you right in the eyeball and touch it anyway. Why? Because they don't understand language to a great degree. They know, I am autonomous. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. Nobody. And so we come forth from the womb speaking lies. The Bible, we cry when we don't need anything. We want attention. That's just the way humanity is. And so society does not make us evil, even though we live in an evil society. We have made society evil by the accumulation of wicked human beings. And thank God that Jesus came into the world to give us hope and a way out of it. Could you imagine had God never sent His Son into this world? What we would be like, you know, all these thousands of years. I'm not even sure we'd still be here. Boy, oh man, yeah. Albert Einstein said one time, he said, World War III will be fought with nuclear weapons. World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. We're on the road to self-annihilation, but where do we think we're going? We think we're going to utopia, exactly. And so Marxism reasons that if economic classes cease to exist, and I hear what Marx says, if economic classes cease to exist because the proletariat, that's the working class, overthrows the bourgeoisie, these are the rich property owners, if that happens, then we can do away with law and we can do away with government because everybody's just going to do the right thing. That's what Karl Marx said. All evil in the world is a direct result of private property. Now, this belief springs from the idea that man is inherently good. That is as anti-biblical as anything I have ever heard in my life. And this new spirituality it's the Shirley MacLaine stuff. You're God. We just need to show you your deity. We were taught back with Charles Darwin of this falsehood of biological evolution. Now we're past that now. We're now looking at cultural evolution. And this new spirituality is the teaching that now we've advanced as far as we can biologically. We're the top of the food chain. Now our culture's got to catch up with our physicality. See, now we've got to be what we are naturally, and that is God. And, you know, when we do that, boom, we're in this new age of perfection. Well, new spirituality is just the old lie wrapped in different lingo. There was a guy who was one of the foremost gurus of new spirituality, and his name is Shakti Gawain. Anybody ever heard of Shakti Gawain? I'll read you a quote by Shakti Gawain here. We're going to be wrapping this up here. Shakti Gawain explains this way, quote, "The real problem with commitment to an external form, okay, is that it doesn't allow room for the inevitable changes of growth of people in relationships. If you promise to feel or behave by a certain set of rules, eventually you're going to have to choose between true to yourself and being true to those rules." You hear what he's saying? We cannot embrace this idea of external rules and regulations, such as the Bible. This is external to man. We can't do that. Because what are you going to do when your internal GPS takes you away from a rule of the Bible? What are you going to do? Well, you are immediately confronted with a choice. And so what I, Shakti Gawain, am encouraging you to do, always follow your heart. Yeah. Always follow what you want to do, and don't let externals control your behavior. This is taking over the United States. And we are becoming a minority. We're becoming museum pieces. You remember William Henry Pratt, back in the 1800s, was concerned about Native Americans. And he wanted to have a school where he could take Native American children from out west and make Americans out of them. And so he found an abandoned army base in Pennsylvania. And he asked the army if he could have it, and they gave it to him. And this guy brought, I think the first load was 55 Indians. He brought from several, they were called nations, groups of Native Americans out west. He brought these kids into Pennsylvania, and he cut their hair, first of all, the boys. He took off their native skins, their buckskins, and the girls took off their native buckskin dresses, and they put gray wool suits on them. And they made them choose an English name. They wrote English names on the board, and they had to go up and choose a name. If they were caught speaking their native tongue, they were whipped. They were made to eat Eastern food. And here was William Henry Pratt's motto. This was his mantra that he preached to his staff day after day after day. He said, "Kill the Indian, save the child. Kill the Indian, save the child." And he disinfected those kids from their native culture, their native language, their native music, their native traditions of food and lifestyle. He took all, that's why Carlisle, Pennsylvania is where this is. And so he went as far east as he could from the west so that they would cut off all of their ties to their moms and their dads and their grandmas and their home all the way out there. But kill the Indian, save the child. And I'm telling you this, that our school systems have become values clarification laboratories where the idea is kill the conservative, kill the Christian, save the child. Let's sanitize all of that stuff out of him because we are in the 21st century. And all of those rules that your mom and dad teach you at home and all that stuff you hear in Sunday school and you hear your preacher preach, that stuff was good for the 1900s. Do you understand how far we've come since then? You understand how much we have evolved and how we've elevated? And now we're big boys and girls now. We don't need anybody telling us what's right and what's wrong. We can determine that ourselves. And so we've got 2 generations of kids who are adults now. And they're having kids, teaching their children this. Now, it is no, it has not. And this is, to me, the exciting thing is, the Bible does not change. The most powerful thing in the world is truth because it doesn't change. And these people are always jumping ship to get on another ship. Well, this ship's sinking, let's get on another ship. And they're on that ship for a while. So they're constantly evolving. Well, if that's the way you want to live life, have at it. It has never produced happiness. It has never produced fulfillment. It has never produced joy in any culture, in any generation. But this has. And so just look at the results. Yes, sir. Oh, boy.